Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us on this Friday, November 1st. And we are very excited to welcome Holly Sommers today. Holly's up there. I think you can all see her. Holly is our Assistant Vice President for Research Administration and provides leadership of very important Office of Sponsored Programs. I want to introduce Holly, and then I want to talk a little bit about our Ease of Research webinar series and what our goal of this webinar series is. But let me first start by welcoming Holly. Holly joined OSP in November of 1999. That's the year I started my fellowship, Holly, in pulmonary and critical care medicine. So it dates both of us now. And she has been in office since then. Holly oversees the operation of OSP, and she has a team of more than 40. Uh, uh, and they handle all our central pre-award research administration activities and also the entire sponsored funding portfolio for Emory, including our federal, foundation, and industry funding. During her time, as you can imagine, Holly has seen significant growth in Emory's sponsored funding from 205 million in 1999 to over 894 millions. That's near 900 million in that was in year 2021, and I know we have been consistently growing. And it's interesting fact about Holly is that before she joined here, she did work for the Conservation and Development Forum at University of Florida, which seems like an interesting job too, Holly,
Very.
especially with the climate change and stuff. So,
Yes.
but we know, Holly, that your office provides all the support behind the scenes for us, and we are very excited that today you can, tell us a little bit about your office and take some questions. And in our ease of research, we have put down some recent guidelines for grant submission deadlines, which
Mhm.
I know affects your office as well. So before I go there, for our faculty who has joined, I do want to share something very quickly, which is this website which we have. And I hope you can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen? Sarah, can they see my screen? So this is our Ease of Research website, which is under
Oh,
research.
we can't see your screen.
You cannot.
Mm-mm.
Oh, all right. So let me try once again. If it doesn't work, we will give the, oh no, because I never pressed share. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so everyone, this is our Ease of Research website. This is actually the town hall. If you go to the Ease of Research website, you can go to Office of Research. This is our Ease of Research initiative. You have to log in. So I won't go there right now, but I want to show you this town hall series, which is under Ease of Research website. And, before this, we had Robert Nobles and Rebecca Russell. And next time on December 6th, we'll be welcoming Esmeralda and Deepika. So I wanted to give you that a little bit before we start. So let's again welcome Holly. And Holly, we're excited to hear what you have to tell us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. First, thank you for the invitation to come speak to Department of Medicine faculty. I appreciate the opportunity. Sarah, I'm not sure how you prefer to do it. If you prefer to hold questions till the end, I'm also happy if questions arise during the presentation to take them as we go. But if Sarah, if you could help me look for those when I go into presentation mode, it's harder for me to see that chats might come through or hands might be raised. But if there are questions along the way, feel free to interrupt. I don't mind. I'd like this to be a dialogue. And to have this session be as beneficial to DOM faculty as it can be. What I hope to want to do today, let me just pull up the presentation to start, make sure everyone can see it. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can, Holly.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So what I want to do today, sort of go over in general what we do at OSP to sort of demystify the work that we do and how we do it, and to give you a sense of who you might work with on various tasks in our office, because I know that's not always an easy question. It's gotten more complicated over the years um, our work has gotten more complicated and we've had to develop some specializations, but we'll get into that in our PowerPoint presentation. So I will, let me just make sure I am getting where I need to. Okay. So again, thank you for the opportunity to come present. I am here representing Emory's Office of Sponsor Programs. What are our basic roles and responsibilities in sponsor programs? Let me make sure this is okay. We are a unit within Emory's Office of Research Administration. We are Emory's central university-wide office, which provides support and oversight for pre-award and non-financial post-award activities. And this is for all sponsored programs for the university and its research community, with the exclusion of industry-sponsored clinical trials. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into sort of the organizational structure of the office. What all this means is that we serve as Emory's authorized representative, the business office and official signatory that acts on behalf of the university and behalf of Emory's faculty for matters related to all sponsored research funding, again, with the exception of industry-sponsored clinical trials. So sort of broadly, what does that mean? And I'll go over each of these in detail. So you guys are familiar with us because we review proposals, we submit them to our funding sponsors. And this includes federal sponsors, our foundation sponsors, as well as flow-through agreements from other institutions. And then we do this for all types of funding mechanisms, whether they're grants, cooperative agreements, or contracts. We review and accept grant awards, including performing internal due diligence, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on that. A big portion of what we do are to review, negotiate, and execute contracts. And those are contracts with federal agencies, with state agencies, as well as foundations, industry, incoming subawards. We prepare and negotiate and execute outgoing subawards when we partner with other institutions. And then we have a whole host of other activities that I'll touch on briefly. Okay. So for proposal review itself, this is something that you interface with us on on a fairly regular basis for our research heavy faculty. But what does that really mean? So what we do in OSP, so obviously that you as faculty will work very closely with the DOM-RAS pre-award staff in developing and putting together your proposal on the sort of the day-to-day detailed documentation required for each and every proposal that we submit. When a proposal routes to us, we review and submit or sign that proposal on your behalf. And that's, again, for any funding agency or any funding mechanism. And so what our office does in that process is we'll take a look at the funding opportunity announcement, the RFA, the PA, or the RFP if it's a contract proposal, and be sure that the proposal is in compliance with the requirements of that document. We will also review any internal compliance approvals that are needed at the time of proposal submission, and this does include conflict of interest disclosures. The way that NIH's in particular's policy is written is that we have to have these disclosures on file at the time of proposal submission. So we can't just wait till award. We have to do this due diligence on the front end at the time of proposal submission. We try to do things like identify unintended inclusion of cost sharing. If it's not required by a program, we have had instances where we've seen very good faith efforts to show institutional support for a program, but which would constitute unintentional and unintended cost sharing. We assist with the development of sections of a business proposal for RFP submission. So if you've ever been involved in a contract proposal, you will know that there are much more complex proposal submission than, say, a simple R01 or even a U grant. to an agency like NIH, an RFP or contract proposal submission has a technical proposal and a business proposal. And the business proposal will require a lot of information on Emory's capabilities as an organization. They'll require us to submit documentation like past performance reviews, past performance references, that sort of thing. And we have a greater involvement in those types of submissions, and we help provide that documentation for those submissions. We actually work through sponsor systems for the majority of the proposal submissions that we do. It's required that an authorized official for the institution submit a proposal. And so our office does that on behalf of your faculty, on behalf of the institution. And then we confirm alignment between an internal proposal record and the final proposal that we submit to the agency, because we produce reports every month that have information on the number of proposals we submit, how much funding we request in those proposals, who's involved in those proposals. And we want to be sure that nothing changed along the way with the internal record when we get to submission of the final proposal document to the agency itself. I know Viva mentioned that the efforts in DOM regarding the proposal deadlines and timelines, we do have a published policy on proposal routing timelines. I'll pop over to it quickly, and it's in our sponsored programs handbook, and it talks about the routing process, why we have the routing process, what's accomplished through that, as well as submission timelines and requests for proposals and what we can do when these timelines are met. It talks about the proposal review process. So you're welcome to go to this website, look through the detail, and look what would be considered a full review of a proposal within our proposal submission processes. And I won't go through all of this. I won't bore you with reading our website to you, but I just wanted you to be aware that that was available to you for review. When it comes to negotiating contracts, this is where we spend a bulk of our time as well. So we will go over anytime we get a contract for funding, whether it's from a federal agency, a state agency, we work with the state quite a bit, industry, or incoming subawards, we have to review the contract for terms that could be problematic for the institutions, whether they either don't conform to Emory policies or they trigger other considerations. So a huge one for us are publication rights. We want to ensure that you as faculty have the right to freely publish the results of your work. That's incredibly important, not just for your own position as academics and the importance of publication in your role as faculty, but to the institution itself. Because if we allow a publication restriction, it could do things like trigger export controls reviews that are necessary, because it would pull the research out of the fundamental research exclusions under export controls laws. It can trigger other issues like making the work subject to what's considered an unrelated business taxable income or things like that. So publication rights are central to our work as an academic institution, and we work very hard to preserve those rights in every contract that we review. Similarly, we want to protect your intellectual property rights. If there's a discovery out of research that's funded under one of these mechanisms, we want to be sure that Emory has the right, retains the right to own that invention or that intellectual property. We might grant an organization or a company a license to, or the option to negotiate a license to use that intellectual property, but we want to be sure we retain the intellectual property title ourselves here at the institution. And then there are other provisions that are sort of more business related, or, moving away from, sort of those that we seek to preserve for our academic mission. And those are things like indemnification. Who is going to be responsible if something goes wrong? And depending on the contract for an industry clinical trial, for instance, if it's not our protocol, we expect the company to be responsible for any issues that might arise. But if we're working on a foundation agreement, or a contract with the state, they might say, look, this is your protocol. You bear all responsibility for the conduct of the research and any adverse results that might occur. We also look at things like confidentiality. What are the confidentiality provisions? We look at payment terms. If we're working with a small company, we might want to make sure that we're paid up front a certain percentage if we're unsure about their financial stability, or we want to make sure that when we submit an invoice, it's paid in a timely fashion. So we try to address those issues on the front end of a contract. And then we look for other problematic clauses, and they can vary. What we have to do in a contract negotiation is really understand the circumstance of the research itself to be able to evaluate the terms of a contract. So we certainly have a contracting manual that we train all of our contracts analysts to, and be sure that they are, adhering to certain standards in our contracting, that we have processes for efficient escalation if we can't reach a mutually agreeable solution with a company. But it really depends on the research itself. So if we're conducting, for instance, human subjects research, indemnification is an important issue. But if we're conducting animal subjects research, it might be less important. We're not going to be sued necessarily by any of the animals in the research the way that we could if there were an issue with human subjects research. There are other clauses as well that trigger issues like a restriction on the participation of foreign nationals. That can cause issues with our fundamental research exemption and things like that. So, that's the large part of what we do with our contracting is just to be sure that we're not triggering any unnecessary or unanticipated issues with the work that we're conducting. With federal contracts are issued under something called the Federal Acquisition Regulations. It's all very prescribed, literally, in documents put forth by the federal government. And we ensure that there are appropriate FAR clauses attached, that they're not, for instance, commercial FAR clauses that wouldn't be applicable to academic research and development. The same for the defense federal acquisition regulations. There's certain defarks clauses that can cause significant problem for us and trigger issues that require extensive, for instance, security controls over data and that sort of thing. So we are sure when we are negotiating contracts that we're addressing all of those issues for each and every contract that we review. And then for any contract, we also do our internal due diligence. We have to be sure that there's not a conflict of interest present in the research. And if there is, that it's appropriately disclosed. If there's research with human subjects, we make sure that there's IRB approval. Similarly, if there's research with animal subjects, we make sure that there's appropriate IACUC approval. For grant awards, it's similar, though it tends to be a little less involved, a little less back and forth than a contract negotiation. For federal grants, we really don't do a terms review per se. The federal grant terms are very predictable. All of our systems are set up for compliance with federal terms, but we'll review each and every federal grant for things like restrictions or special terms or milestones, or, CDC is pretty famous for requiring a revised budget within a certain time period. So we try to call those out on an NOA to be sure that you as investigators see those terms and know what some of these requirements are. We're going to make sure that the correct indirect cost rate is used. Again, similarly, we have to do an internal due diligence with COI determinations and then any required compliance approvals, whether it's IRB or IACUC. For non-federal grants, those terms can vary quite widely, and they could be included as part of a grant award document that we negotiate very much like a contract. Again, I'm sorry, did someone have a?
No, I think it was just
okay. Sorry, I can't see that when I'm in presentation.
No, don't worry,
so.
Holly. I'm keeping an eye on it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So for non-federal grants, again, we don't really have in general as much back and forth with a sponsoring agency if we're reading, for instance, a foundation grant agreement. The terms might be in an agreement itself, or they might be referenced as part of an organization's policy. So for AHA, for instance, they have a pretty standard form letter that they use to make awards, and that references their standard grants policies. So we review all of that. And again, for a foundation grant, for instance, the considerations tend to be a little bit different. We look at their intellectual property rights, intellectual property policies, and determine who is expected to own inventions that result. But there's also often language on revenue sharing. And we look at that. We work with Tech Transfer Office, OTT, to be sure that any references to a revenue sharing policy are within what's acceptable to the university. Most foundations not only, grant us publication rights, but have policies requiring public access to publications. So we rarely see issues in that regard. We will occasionally run into issues of indemnification. And that will come into play with a foundation grant because generally they're very hands off. They're like, here's your funding, you go do your research and you're going to indemnify us for all of your work. And that makes sense. Where we might run into a problem is if they require us to indemnify on behalf of other organizations that are outside of Emory's control, that might be state organizations who themselves can't indemnify us. And we can run into little hiccups along the way with things like that, but we work through them. We go through our escalation process when necessary and only when necessary to get to agreement with our foundation sponsors as quickly as possible. Just check the chat. Oh, okay. We also have the same internal due diligence that we do for these types of grants, where we make sure that there's no conflict of interest that needs to be reported, and that we have all necessary approvals in place when we are sending an award over to be set up. We also are responsible for preparing, negotiating, and executing all outgoing subawards on the portfolio of work that we handle. And this includes our internal due diligence. We have to coordinate a risk assessment process for any subaward issued under a federal grant, and this is required by uniform guidance. It's very prescriptive on what we have to do, what we have to see, because our institutional profile form is part of that. We have to gather information on each subrecipient and identify what the degree of risk is, and then implement a risk plan if we have organizations that we work with that are of what would be considered higher risk. And the risk plan is generally things like just asking for a little bit additional documentation, maybe supporting documentation of costs. If we're working with a small organization who's never handled U.S. federal funding and many foreign organizations, we might require them to do some training to be sure that we know that they know how to be good stewards of U.S. federal dollars. We also ensure that subrecipients meet any required standards. So again, for any federal funding, when we issue a subaward to another organization, we have to make sure they have the appropriate registration in the system for award management, which is a federal government system that has registration numbers. Emory's fully registered, so we have to broker that with an organization. And then if our subrecipients are doing human or animal subjects research with federal money, then we have to make sure that they have the appropriate assurances, that they have either an animal welfare assurance or a federal-wide assurance for human subjects research as appropriate. So we help coordinate those efforts. On behalf of the department and the RAS, we will create a purchase order in Emory Express for domestic subs. And then we just do, what we do with the contract negotiation. We draft and mail out the subaward document. We have to flow down appropriate terms from the sponsor. For federal funding, we utilize a template that was designed by something called the Federal Demonstration Partnership. It's been vetted by many, many institutions around the country. It's very easily accepted. We find that it really streamlines the subrecipient subaward issuing process. But we have our own templates as well that we utilize when the FTP templates might not be robust enough for the purpose, or we have a sponsor that's a non-federal sponsor. And then we do tracking and following up to be sure that, we allow appropriate time for our partners to review and sign documents. We know that they have their processes that they need to follow, but we do follow up to be sure that there's timely execution on their end. And then we distribute the final negotiated subaward as part of the purchase order in Emory Express or through other means to be sure that everyone knows what the terms of a particular subaward are, so that we can be sure appropriate management throughout the life of the subaward. I won't, I won't,
Holly,
yeah,
can I ask some questions here? Because
yeah, of
sub-awards are a
course.
big one. So,
Yes, of course
so let's just discuss that a little bit and see if
Okay.
faculty, and I know Dr. Joshi was writing something and maybe he can ask his question directly as well. But, for sub-awards, it takes a very long time to get the sub-awards issued, and rightfully so in some ways, because like you're saying, there's a lot for you guys to look over, right?
Right.
Is there is that like dependent upon the project, or can we have, say, for example, we all at places we collaborate with, these universities with
Mhm.
mostly sub-awardees, right? So do you have some sort of a uh, overarching contract with some universities in which you guys understand each other's language more? Say, let's say UPenn, do you guys
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
something with some blanket, something with some of these universities which can make some of these sub awards easier?
Yeah, so I do have a slide a little bit later in the presentation that shows some of our metrics on sub awards because I do know that
Okay.
that has been an issue. I will be happy to report when we get to the slide that the time is coming down. We don't have master agreements with other organizations per se.
Okay.
Where we try to gain efficiencies is using honestly the FDP template. So if we're working with another domestic organization on a fairly routine uh, research project, we use the FDP template. So organizations like Penn, Michigan, Vanderbilt, Duke, WashU, whomever we might, any other, US university is likely already familiar with the template and can review and read through it very quickly. We, as part of the FDP and as part of our general approach to wanting to make things as easy as we can, not that we can make it easy, but we can try to decomplicate it, if that's a word. Um, we don't modify that template in any way. We attach a statement of work, we attach a budget. That template is a fairly broadly written template that most institutions can accept for most projects. And so we use that whenever we can because we find that it really streamlines, it makes it easier on us to issue and it's easier on our subrecipient partners. Where we might not use that particular template is if we have, for instance, an investigator-initiated clinical trial where our investigator is the sponsor investigator and
Okay.
has a whole host of obligations to the FDA. In our assessment, the template is not quite robust enough for that because of the reporting requirements, those sorts of things. We still have a template for those circumstances that we can plug the information into pretty quickly. It is not an onerous template. It's just got a little bit more robustness, as I've said, with respect to ensuring that our investigator can meet their obligations under the FDA in those particular circumstances. So it's very specific to the work, but we do use the broadly accepted FTP template to the greatest degree possible. And
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about timelines because I do know that we were very, very slow. We had turnover on the team, and I'll talk about our organization and how we do our work. And so we are really working to address those issues um, uh, as as much as we can. I see Dr. Fairley to do it.
Yes, we have two questions. We have Dr. Joshi, who is asking that I'm a new DOM faculty wanting to do an early phase industry sponsored study with GCRC's support. And his
Okay.
question is, will OSP office manage contracts and the CDA for me?
So if it is industry funded, and this is where I'll talk about an organization, I can sort of touch on it here. That industry for other than Department of Pediatrics, which does not impact Department of Medicine, a new office has been created within the institution to handle industry-funded clinical trials specifically. It's under the leadership of Don Harvey. It was created last February. We sort of had a soft launch of it, but it's run and headed by Daniela Carter. So if what you're talking about is an industry-sponsored clinical trial, then OSP actually would not handle that. It would be the Woodruff Industry sponsored clinical research office or the WISC office, but they would do the CDA, they would handle the contracting. If it's any sponsor other than that, we would do the CDA, we would assist with the agreement. And this may be something that we can talk offline about if it's a sort of a more complicated arrangement, to be sure that you get to the correct office for that.
No, I think that's an excellent point. Thank you, Holly, for clearing that. And that's helpful for our faculty to know because it's a little confusion otherwise for them. So
Yeah, and
yes, thank you.
I'll talk a little bit about that when I
Okay.
get to in the next slides to Dr.
Yeah,
Fairley's point.
I think to Dr. Fairley's point also, I think you have this in the slide. So let's let you proceed and
Okay,
then we
I'll
will come back to
proceed
that.
and I'll
Okay.
be, Dr. Fairley, if I don't get to it, I'll be sure to come back to it.
Okay.
So I won't
Perfect.
read through all of this. This just kind of gives you a flavor of all the others. So I kind of picked out the big buckets of things that we do, but these are all the other pieces of the work that go along with being a quote unquote pre-award, non-financial post-award office. So we do no cost extensions, changes of scope, changes of effort, pan requests, like I said, CDAs, NDAs, certain of those. It's not quite as easy as you would like, and certain DUAs and MTAs. So there's a lot. We initiate the award setup process in Compass. We do just in time. So where I went into detail are sort of like the 5 big buckets of work that we do, but this is sort of everything else that goes along with it. And I won't bore you with the details on that. Okay, so how we accomplish our work, and this speaks to who you would work with. And this has evolved over time. So if even mentioned, I've been here since 1999, and you think, well, I don't like change. I've stayed in the same office, but we have certainly had our share of change. The way we handle our work has evolved over time to meet the needs of the institution. And that is both from the volume growth as well as the increasing complexity of the regulatory environment that governs the work that we do. That has done nothing but increase over time. I mean, I started before HIPAA was even a law. So the exchange of data, I mean, faculty just exchanged data. We didn't do data use agreements. We didn't have to worry about HIPAA applicability, those sorts of things. It was, industry-sponsored clinical trials were fairly straightforward at the time. And so we had a service model that was a little bit different back then. But how we do things now, so OSP comprises, we have 3 main functional units. We have a grants team, a contracts team, and a subcontracts team. So the grants team is pretty straightforward. They handle, all grant awards. So you can imagine an NIH deadline, this past October 5th, the grants team was fast and furious with NIH R01 proposals. I think we started the day with close to 100 that needed to be submitted. Our contracts team handles all of our contracts, and these are industry contracts and non-industry contracts. We do have sub teams. So our non-industry sub team, or our non-industry contracting team, handles all of our federal contracting, which again is very specific under the FAR. They handle our state contracts. They handle the majority of our incoming subcontracts, except those that are on the FDP template. And then we have a very now small industry contracting team that handles our industry research agreements and other industry contracting activity, except for clinical trials. Those, as I mentioned, are carved out under the WISC group, with the exception of Department of Pediatrics. There's more complexity with that, with our relationship with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And obviously that doesn't generally affect faculty in DOM, but there is now the WISC group under Don Harvey's leadership that handles the university's industry-sponsored clinical trials portfolio. Within each of these, and then we have the outgoing subcontracts team, and this is a team dedicated to doing nothing but issuing our outgoing subcontracts. We found that we just the number of subcontracts we need to issue every year has been growing and growing. We need not only dedicated individuals who aren't sidetracked with, let's say, an NIH R01 deadline where we can do nothing but focus on those proposals, but also become experts in those processes, particularly since we are under requirements from uniform guidance to do certain subrecipient monitoring activities, and those are concentrated in our subcontracting team. Within each team, Day-to-day responsibilities are handled by analysts, and those analysts have oversight and input by either directly by an assistant director, an associate director, and then general oversight of each group by a director. Within each team, there are assignments by department. So you will have a team of individuals. So folks in cardiology know Barry Prine incredibly well. Barry has been the representative for cardiology for many, many years. I think he would kill me if I ever tried to reassign it. He loves working with you guys. But he's our primary grants representative on the grants team for Division of Cardiology. But we do have intra-team coverage. So, if we have, so taking Barry, for example, because he supports the Division of Cardiology, on an AHA deadline, he might get 20 or 30 proposals that need to be reviewed and submitted. And so we will share the load on days like that to be sure that there's appropriate coverage. So other team members who might not have as heavy a day that particular deadline day, we will do some cross-team intra-team coverage. And then for staff absences, we want our team to take their time off that they earn to get mental breaks. This is a fast and furious business. So everything that walks in the door that's a proposal due or an activity that needs to be done is assigned to a person, and they know it's their responsibility to get it done. And then we know when the coverage needs to happen when we have, staff out on vacation or sick or whatever. We do have signature authority distributed throughout the teams, and that's based on an individual's level within our career path. We implemented a career path several years ago to foster retention, to foster development, to support succession planning. There was a variety of reasons we did that. So we have some analysts who've achieved the lead analyst role, and they essentially are seasoned analysts. They're not necessarily in a management role, but they have been doing this work for years. They don't need secondary review by an assistant or an associate director, so they might submit their proposals directly. Whereas if we have an associate sponsored research analyst, which is a couple levels down, they're new to the work. We do training, but this is a very particular business where there's so much nuance that the training curve is fairly long. So we do secondary reviews, and an assistant or associate director will submit those proposals after kind of doing coming behind and being sure everything is caught and the proposal is in good shape. So our organizational chart and a detailed description of the responsibilities of each team can be found at these sites. I won't pop over because I am bumping up against time a little bit. I truly do not expect you to read this. But this is our org chart. It's available at the link that you can see. The teams are actually color coded. So this team here is our grants team. These are the individuals on our contracts team, and these are the individuals on our subcontracts team. Each of these teams is headed by a director. Teresa Sussman is director of grants. Janet Hannum Hayes is director of contracts. Maggie Hassan is director of outgoing subcontracts. So each of those directors is dedicated to the operation of their particular units. We obviously have a lot of cross-team meetings and we're constantly shifting and addressing issues. So, for instance, Janet's team has been a little lower on staffing. We had some staff vacancies. We had a couple positions that had been put on hold that we've thankfully had released again, so that we're back recruiting fast and furiously. So when her team was undergoing that, then we shift what we can to the grants team to be sure that everybody is pitching in and assisting to the greatest degree possible. I do want to note that we do have the ability to track the work, and I have heard it said, and I want to dispel the myth to the greatest degree possible that we're a bit of a black hole. We don't know where things are. We do have access to tracking pretty much all of the big chunks of work that we do in one system or another. Where the shortfall is it's not one system. It's one system or another, and it's multiple systems. So proposals, if you want to know where something is in the routing process, there's workflow available to the RAS team to look at where is a proposal in Epic sitting for the next approval? Has it reached OSP? Has it not reached OSP? Is it a department? Is it at a collaborating school? Where is it? For grant awards, a number of years ago, we're probably 12 or so years ago, we developed an internal stopgap system called the Electronic Grants Tracking System. And it's not a slick system. It's better than nothing. But over the years, we have tried to make improvements to it. There is access to it. So for anybody with an Emory University net ID and login can go to EGTS and find an award that is in pending status or a completed award to see where it is in the negotiation process. We log into that, we record notes, we're waiting on this, we've sent this to whomever. And similarly for contracts, we have the ECTS system. They are two different systems. At the time the systems were developed, the two functions had been separated. So as I kind of made a joke about, we've gone through various restructuring over the years, and it just happened to be the case that these systems were designed when contracting was carved out a little bit from the grant side. We've merged back together with now the exception of the creation of WISC. But both WISC and OSP's contracting teams use the ECTS system. And again, any contract that is in process should be in that system with updated notes. The challenge for us and OSP is it's a very manual system. We have to key the entry manually. We have to, if we've sent an email to somebody or sent a red line, we have to separately go in the system and key that we have done so. So there's pretty summary information, but it should be available. For prior approval requests and subaward requests, these are custom pages that we've designed in Compass. So if you send us a request to issue an outgoing subaward, we track the status of that in a place that the RAS can access and see the status and when we sent it out, when we've done our follow-ups, issues that we might have encountered, that sort of thing. And then similarly for prior approval requests, which are your no-cost extensions, PAN requests, if you have a change of effort request, change of scope requests, those are also available to review where they are in status in the grant form page. I do want to just I wouldn't be me if I didn't show a little bit of data. This is Emory's research growth over the past 10 years. And you'll notice that in fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, we topped $1 billion. So you can see that there's a pretty steep curve, particularly in the last 5 years, with Emory's funded research, including topping $1 billion for the first time in fiscal year 23 and then exceeding the 23 amount in 24. So our growth has been significant. That is a testament to all of the work that our faculty are doing, all of the work that the RAS are doing to support our faculty, and all of the research administration offices that support our research. We have just done our best to support that growth. Similarly, you can see the proposal submission figures for the last 10 years to the point that we hit $2 billion in proposal dollars submitted this past August for the fiscal year 24. Just briefly on proposal receipt timelines, just to share a little bit of information. These are when proposals arrive in OSP in relation to the deadline date. And this is based on EPICS data, which is best case scenario. A lot of times we'll see EPICS records routed to us several days before the final proposal is ready. So we might not be able to submit a proposal. Obviously we can't submit a proposal till you as faculty have finished the research plan. We've gotten all the T's crossed, I's dotted, that sort of thing. But this is sort of the general receipt date for everything that we do, with the exception of industry-sponsored clinical trials. And we exclude those because they don't really have a proposal process per se. It would skew the numbers in a way that makes them less meaningful to us. But you can see for School of Medicine, almost half the proposed, 48% of the proposals that we get. And this is all of School of Medicine for the past 5 years through fiscal year 23, got to us no sooner than the day before the due date, with almost 30% getting to us the day of the deadline. And we still do our best to do as full a review as possible. We can't always do that. When we don't get the time, we sort of go to what is going to stop a proposal from getting in the door. Because now that we do electronic submissions, there are all of sorts of validations that are put on a proposal. So we just make sure we can get it in the door, and then we go to more substantive review. Alex Wagner in the Research Data Analytics Group has been sharing with me what I think is an interesting slide, that shows success rates in relation to receipt of a proposal. So if you look for School of Medicine over here, for proposals that, and these are for proposals submitted more than 18 months ago, we have to wait a certain amount of time before we can do any looking at success rates, because NIH proposals are pending for 9 months or so. So we kind of double that period to make sure we're going to capture is something truly no longer under consideration at the sponsor. So looking at proposals submitted 18 months prior for School of Medicine, if they're submitted to us the day of the deadline, the success rate is 30%, 31%. Day before the deadline, it's 35%, and at least 2 days. And we don't do any more than that. If you're 2 days ahead or 5 days ahead, it's in this population, then the success rate bumps up to 45%. So we've shared these, and again, these are from Alex Wagner, and he's the one that's sort of spearheading this type of data analytics. We've shared these figures with Deb Bruner, and just, as informational for business leaders on campus, and what we see in terms of success rates for proposals. I did want to highlight this. I do know that subcontracts are a frustration. And if you look at fiscal year 22, we were having significant problems. As I mentioned, we had significant turnover on the team. We were way backed up with our subcontracts, and we were not performing well. We have been dedicating time and effort to our outgoing subcontracts. We've added members to the team. Robert Nobles and Deb Bruner have advocated for resources for us, to which I am eternally grateful. And so you can see that we have, the green line is the median days for a subaward to be issued. And this is the whole process. This is from receipt to execution. So we're at 30 days. We look at different timeframes because the full execution process has a significant portion of time that's outside of our control. We just can't control how long another institution takes to review or get under, do their internal processing. So we look at other time periods that I don't have reflected here. How long from when we get a completed request do we get a draft out? Because that's sort of, nothing can happen until we get that first draft out. So we look at that in addition to this. But I did want to share, we are working on this. We do know it is an issue. And again, these are medians, so there's a portion of subaward requests that take longer than this, and we know we need to continue to do work, but we have made improvements. It is a focus for us. We do know that there has been pain in this area, and we want to continue to make improvements in this area. And we've been able to do that thanks to the resources dedicated to and process improvements we've been putting in place, despite a 68% increase in volume over the past 2 years. So again, with most things, we're juggling how do we keep our efficiency while handling an increase in volume across the board. And so some of the things that we have been doing, some of our recent initiatives that we've put in place over the past couple of years is, one, we created 2 positions on the team when we restructured, when we did have industry contracting coming back for a short period of time. We created 2 positions at our entry-level analyst position to do nothing but manage our incoming NIH awards. They're fairly routine. What our thinking was, we could train individuals who do nothing but that to do that and do them very efficiently, because those are our highest volume. And we've done that. They're doing great. In fact, they're doing so well. We're looking at expanding their portfolio. Could they, take on NSF awards? Can they take on awards from other agencies? And that's allowed our other group of analysts to really focus where negotiation is needed, where there's a value add to the work that they do in terms of being able, needing to negotiate with sponsors to acceptable terms. We've also made some utilization of robotic process automation. So for our deadline day stuff, particularly for something like an NIH deadline where we might have 100 proposals on the day of the deadline, we use an RPA process to help track things and be sure that nothing slips through the cracks. What we have coming up for some future initiatives, we have initiatives that are just simply compliance driven. We can't control that. This is the federal government putting compliance approvals or compliance requirements in place. One is national Security Policy Memorandum 33, you may have heard that. This NSPM 33 is going to come with a whole host of requirements for research security plans, and that includes things like cybersecurity and foreign travel security. There are going to be training requirements, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there are going to be training requirements for faculty. And again, this is not something we can simply not do. If we're going to accept federal money and we are way above the threshold where we become a covered entity for this type of activity, we're going to have to ensure that faculty who are federally funded meet these training requirements. And we're working on these processes. You'll hear more about these in the coming days. And then there's certain certification requirements where each individual is going to have to certify that they're not, for instance, part of a maligned foreign talent program. We're developing a dashboard for all of this. It's, again, you will hear much, don't worry about it yet. We'll come and we'll share a lot of information with you when the time is right. Right now, the requirements were just finalized in July. The memorandum itself is actually directed at federal agencies. So the federal agencies have until January 9th of 2025 to develop how they are going to comply. And then we will have a certain period of time before we have to become compliant. So that's just to say this is coming, but not immediate. This is why, some of this lack of details, some of the fact that the agencies themselves have not issued their plans. So we can't give you details, but this is the sort of thing that we in sponsored programs working with the Research Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Office have to keep on our radar screens to be sure that we are getting prepped and ready. We've already, like I said, we've done a lot of work on a dashboard. We're trying to make compliance as easy as possible. Again, it will not necessarily be easy, but it will be as easy as possible. We also have what's called CMMC compliance. CMMC is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, and that's related to certain DoD work and the types of system controls we have to have in place for things like data security. Again, most of our work is not subject to these requirements, but if you do certain DoD work, then it is, we would have to work with you and work with system security folks and the new Emory Digital team to be sure we can meet these requirements. And we're also exploring the use of artificial intelligence for contracting support. And we're doing this in concert with Don Harvey and the WISC group of, there are a lot of packages out there that can do, let's say, a first pass at a contract negotiation. So are there tools out there that we can use to help keep us as efficient as possible to streamline things to the greatest degree possible? So we're just beginning an exploration of that. And then finally, I'm sure you all have heard about Insight, which is a comprehensive grants management system. This is going to be one of our biggest focuses for the coming year. There will be multiple modules. When I talked about the systems that we do have in place, I mentioned different systems with different logins. Nothing's, they're standalone systems, they're homegrown systems. Insight will be a comprehensive grants management system, and we plan on implementing a number of modules in the same system. So there will be, down the road, it'll be a couple years. We're doing it in phases, but there'll be a one-stop shopping. You can go into a single system to see your grant proposals, your agreements that are in process, and this is both funded and unfunded agreements, where you make your disclosures for COI, your IRB protocols, your IACUP protocols. So as you can imagine, this is a huge project, and we're deeply engaged in it already. There have been and will continue to be many sessions to get faculty input. I encourage you all to participate to the degree you can. I know you're all very busy. But we're very excited about this project and what, as Robert likes to say, modernizing our IT infrastructure in support of Emory's research initiative. I realize I have talked up to the last 5 minutes. I didn't expect it to take quite that long, but I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So, Holly, there was a question from Jessica about the international research. Jessica, you can unmute and ask if you like, but her question was, do you have dedicated specialists who special training in foreign negotiations? Because she mentions having to give up a foreign contract because of difficulty in negotiation and a tight timeline from the sponsor.
So we don't have one person on each team dedicated only to international research. What we do have, if it's an outgoing subaward, we have Christina Chamberlain, who is our assistant director on that team, that tends to take on these more complex agreements. And she has developed, she's a JD. She's very knowledgeable. She has developed significant expertise in our international portfolio of outgoing subcontracts. If it's incoming funding, we do have individuals that have significant international expertise that are available to assist. It really depends on the source of incoming funding. So if it's something like grants from the EU, they fund very differently from US organizations. So, it can be a little bit of a discovery every time, but we do have individuals, and our associate directors as well, who have experience with some of these, international projects that can be more complicated. And if there are specific questions, I'm more than happy to look into, specific delays. But we do know that there are challenges with our international work, some of which we will be able to continue and improve, and some is just inherent to the nature of the work. Things we have to explore when we do international, do we need in-country registration of any sort? How do we pay people in country? That sort of thing. So we also work with the global Chris Rappeljay and the global services team to provide support for our global activities.
Thanks, Holly. Any other questions from that group? You can unmute, you can put the video on. So Holly, I know as an investigator, my how much I interact with OSP is very limited because we go through our pre-awards to interact with you. But talking about the deadlines, it was sort of fascinating for me to see that numbers you were showing and the fact that the grants are getting to you that late, right? So we started the deadline policy in Department of Internal Medicine just because of this reason, that there was a lot of frustration on both sides. There was frustration among our investigators that even if they put the grant in time, it is still being submitted on the day it's due. And so that is something I want to bring up with you, because if you are showing me a pack in which everybody is submitting their grants late, if we do make this deadline in which we get you our full project 4 days ahead, then it will be unfair if our project is still being submitted on the last day.
So I can tell you that our internal policy, it's not really a written policy, it may be in our policy and procedures, but that we talk a lot about particularly on the grants team, is that we have to honor early submissions. If we don't honor early submissions by reviewing within an acceptable time frame when something comes to us in the days before a deadline, then there's absolutely no incentive for our faculty to submit things early.
Yes.
How that works in practice. So if we do get a grant that is, several days before the deadline, we are supposed to review that within 24 hours. If we get it, say, one afternoon, and the analyst that supports the department has other grants that are due that day, then obviously we have to meet deadlines. That's, it's just sort of the bottom line is that we have to meet deadlines. That said, if we say we get it one afternoon, we can't get to it that afternoon because of more emergent proposals. Our policy, our internal process is that it should be reviewed first thing the next morning. That it should be reviewed immediately as long as everything is ready for review, and then we do a comprehensive review and get that feedback to you. So that's what should be happening. If that is not happening, then please let me know, because we do have these conversations with our analysts to be sure that we are no proposals that's ready to submit sits longer than 24 hours. Obviously if we have a shorter amount of time, that's what the time we do our work in. But if a proposal is submitted to us several days before the deadline and is final and ready to submit, then we need to be attending to it. And if we're falling short of that, then by all means, raise it to me, raise it to Teresa Sussman. Teresa's the director of the grants team. She has routine meetings with her team. We use a variety of tools to manage our deadline issues. But we should not have situations where faculty feel like they got something early and it was still submitted the day of the deadline.
Okay. Thank you, Holly. That's very helpful to hear. Any other questions? Please feel free if
Yeah,
anybody
I'm
has
happy.
any.
I'm happy to
Yeah, we
answer.
can stay
I
another
know I
few
went through.
minutes. Yeah.
I
But
I
Holly, I do want to bring up then, going back to the same thing. We thought about this question. When we send the proposal to OSP, a lot of it's also reviewing our budget, how our bio sketches are, everything. Like you guys have to look
Mhm,
over every little detail.
mhm.
Is it possible that there is obviously from what I have heard is that you also want the final signs to be sent at the same time. Is it
Yeah,
possible for us to route the proposal and have this ability to say the final signs has to be updated like 3 days before or 2 days before, like, before the submission?
right now our systems don't really support that, unfortunately, given the volume that we have. Because what ends up happening in practice is other things change other than the science, and we end up having to re-review an entire proposal again. And we just don't have the manpower to do multiple reviews. I am hopeful. I cannot make any promises. If we had a system that had better audit logs, so we would know what had changed and what hadn't, and we could focus on what had changed, then we might be able to do some earlier reviews. But we don't have that now. And
Mm,
what we have found happens in practice is our analysts, they don't want to miss anything. And if they, one day look at a proposal and in the interim look at three different proposals and then go back to that first proposal, they're going to have to re-familiarize themselves with it, remember what they've looked at. And out of abundance of caution, they're most likely going to look at everything again because we don't want to miss anything. Our team really prides themselves in the work that they do and the support that they give. And we've just found that it creates some inefficiencies for the team across the board because we can't tell what has changed and what hasn't. Now, I'm hopeful with one of the things about Insight is there's going to be they're currently developing. So we use Cayuse proposals for our federal system to system for our grants.gov submissions. MGB is currently developing their own, what we call an S2S, that will be integrated with Insight, which will be fantastic because it will eliminate this duplicate entry because you're in Cayuse doing everything and then you're in Epics kind of recreating the information. It'll be a single system. I'm hoping there's more robust audit logs within that so that we can say, okay, as of this date, I'd reviewed this. Those things haven't changed. I can feel confident that I don't have to look at that again. And then I can move forward with reviewing only the pieces that have changed because we do know that faculty want to continue to polish the research plan, do as much work on it as possible, and not be hit with surprises. That all said, if we have huge proposals, if we have PPGs, big U grants, we are happy to take a look at pieces in advance to the greatest degree that we
mm,
can, just so that we don't have, we're not trying to do everything at the last minute or hopefully the day before or 2 days before. We're happy to be as flexible as we can be. We just can't do it for 100% of the proposal population. We just don't have the
makes sense.
manpower for that.
Yeah, but I think it makes sense for larger projects to be
Yeah,
able to do that so that,
yeah,
because
and that,
because those are the ones where you're going to find
mm.
problems.
And I do want to mention, I think one of the unintended consequences or side effects of the RAS implementation from a decade ago or whenever it was is that faculty felt they couldn't reach out to us directly, that they were supposed to work with their RAS units, and they do. And you are going to work with your RAS units more closely than OSP to a great degree. That doesn't mean if you have questions, feel free to reach out directly to us. We are happy to have conversations. We are happy to answer questions. If you have concerns, if you just want to know about a timeline, or why something, we're negotiating something on a contract the way we do. We are happy to have you reach out to us. There's nothing in anything that says we don't want faculty to come to OSP directly. We absolutely not true. We are happy to have you reach out to us. If you have questions on a proposal that's due in 5 months, we're happy to have the conversation now and to answer those questions. We love hearing about things in advance. So, to all the faculty on this call, if don't hesitate to reach out to us at any point in the process if you have questions. We are more than happy to help. And don't worry about, I showed you sort of our org chart and how we divide our work up. Don't worry about having to know you get to the right person. If you go to the grants team and it's something handled by the contracts team, we're going to make that connection for you. We're going to get you in touch with the right person to can answer your question. So, don't hesitate just because you're not sure if it's grant, a subcontract, whatever it might be. We know that our service model can be a little confusing. We have evolved here over time based on what we've learned and where we have learned we needed to specialize. And it largely came out of what problems our old model caused. If you have someone who's negotiating contracts, for instance, also handling grant proposals, their days and contracts don't get touched because of the grant deadline. So that's why we have specialists in that area and dedicated to it that don't get sidetracked by many grant proposals or who just are able to become expert in the negotiation process because it's a skill. Negotiation is a skill, and we try to hone that in that team. And so that's why we have specialized, but I recognize it's not as easy as I'm your rep for cardiology for all things sponsored programs, and you know who I am and you come to me with all your questions. So we do recognize it's a little more complicated, but it's just been a necessity as we have grown and as the regulatory environment has grown.
Holly, I can't thank you enough for really taking time. We thank you and your entire team. We know all the work you do behind, you are the hidden figures for, when we get these grants and we get these laurels for getting the grants or the work we do, but really it not possible without your help. So
Well, thank
we
you
do
very
want to
much.
tell you our appreciation for all you do for us and and for the process of your continuing effort to continue to improve this process. And I think a lot of us actually are not aware of that. So I just wanted to make sure we bring this forward. And I know that, for example, Rachel Gelman supports me. I didn't see
Yeah,
Rachel's name. She's still here, right?
she is. She is.
Oh, okay. I
There's
was looking at
a
the org
very
chart.
small org chart.
Yes.
I
So
mean, we
like,
have a big group, so which I'm hugely thankful for. Yeah,
yes.
no, Rachel's awesome. We love her.
And I email Rachel directly at times, and she
Yeah.
really, really helps. So thank you. And because I think you see the name of the OSP person when you
Mhm.
get an award or something, so you know who that person is. So
Yeah,
Holly,
definitely.
thank you again, and we
Absolutely.
look forward to a continuing partnership. Thank you all for attending, and I know a lot of RAS team is up here too, so thank you. And everybody have a lovely weekend.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Take care, Holly. Bye.
Bye-bye.